Hello and welcome to Take Control of Your Career. I'm Lauren Herring, and if you are a woman who is looking to level up in your career, then you are in the right place. Today, we are joined by Dr. Dawn Graham, Director of Career Management at Wharton, host of Dr. Dawn on Careers on Sirius XM, LinkedIn Learning instructor, TEDx speaker, and author of Switchers, which is the go-to guide for people considering a career change. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Lauren. This is great.
Great. Well, let's just get into it. So you see it all as an executive coach, career coach, host of your radio program, and as the Wharton Career Director. So what trends are you seeing now in the workforce that current and future leaders need to be focused on in order to future-proof their career?
Yeah, this is a great question for both companies as well as job seekers, because we all need to kind of know what's coming. And the thing we've learned over the last year is that it's actually unpredictable. And so you're like, well, what kind of answer is that? But I think that's what we've learned is we have to learn to function well in ambiguity. We have to learn to roll with the punches, to switch our strategy when unexpected things happen. And I think that's something that a lot of individuals as well as companies have learned over the last year. And it's a great lesson because there are a number of things that we can do to prepare for unknown changes that might come ahead. Of course, there are certain things that we already saw coming, like technology taking over a lot of jobs and changes in industries, new industries popping up, other industries dying out. We've seen people working longer and second act careers. We've seen people going back to get reskilled and different educational points throughout their career. So these are all things that had been happening, but they've been accelerated with the pandemic. So whereas you might have thought, I don't have to worry about those things in my job for another 10 years, or I'm just going to ride out my career and not really think about learning new technology or reskilling, a lot of people are realizing that they need to do that. And the unpredictability of what we've experienced in the last year has taught us that we need to remain on top of that as individuals. We need to understand what's happening in the market, not just in our own industry, but around us. We need to understand how technology is impacting what we do. And we need to constantly assess how our skills are employable or make us employable. And so we can no longer ignore these things. And I think that's what this unpredictability has taught us all, is that we really have to pay attention to our careers, which is not necessarily different. It's just something that has gone to the forefront now that we've been through this.
Yeah, that's a great point. We talk about all the time in the business landscape in general, how important agility is in order to be able to roll with the punches no matter what your job throws at you. But the reality is, it's just as important in the job search, and you need to be able to figure out where you're going to go next. If your industry is on a downward slope, then how do you figure out what's next for you? So great thoughts for people to really take into their broader career perspective. So, you are the go-to person on career switches, as you call it, career changing. And I talk to people all the time who are considering significant career shifts, which can be really challenging and an overwhelming situation for people to embark on. So still, you say that switchers are becoming the new normal. So why is that?
Yeah, so I think this, again, was one of those trends that was happening pre-pandemic, but has been accelerated. There's a number of research studies out there by human resource organizations, consulting firms, showing that people have wanted to make a big change over the last year, or people have been forced to make a big change because of the impact to their industry. So again, this has been something that's been growing as our market shifted with technology, globalization, and all of these other impacts that have changed markets. But people are now thinking, wow, this pandemic has really opened my eyes. I want to do something that makes me feel like I have a meaningful career, or that's maybe more lucrative, or helps me save money, or makes me more employable. And so we're seeing a lot of people really dig into the fact of what are all those things that would really fulfill me or would meet my needs. And so the book I wrote, Switchers, is really not a book about how to explore. It's more of a, you've done your exploration, you figured out what you want to do. Now, how do I do it? Because this is something that I'm sure we'll talk about, but the hiring process as it is now is not set up for switchers. It's very much set up for people with traditional career paths. And as more and more people start to make switches, that's going to need to shift. But in the shorter term, what I want to do is help people get around some of these hurdles as career switchers, because so many people have transferable skills, but right now they have to do the heavy lifting to show the marketplace how those skills lead to results in a different industry or in a different function. And so that's not something a lot of people have been taught to do, but as more and more people decide, I want to do something different, this is a skill that we're all going to need to learn until the hiring process catches up with the pace of switching. And I think it will. And I think that's something to look forward to. But in the meantime, the work is on us to do that heavy lifting.
Yeah, great point. And one of the things that I have had some really interesting conversations with individuals examining just the potential of, do I want to switch? Do I want to switch jobs? Do I want to switch, careers? And I would say that there's an element of the pandemic that is causing people to pause and reflect and identify what's really important. So do you see that playing a role in people deciding to make that switch more?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. It's not only what's important to them, but what's important in the work I do, and what's important in the type of company I'm working for, and what's that company's mission. And do I feel like what I'm doing every day is having some type of impact in terms of things that are important to me? So I think a lot of people are thinking through that. We see a lot more people getting certifications, taking LinkedIn Learning courses, and doing other things to educate themselves so that they can get make these changes in the marketplace. And quite honestly, Lauren, I believe that my book will be obsolete in 10 years, because so many people will be making switches that a switcher won't be a thing. It will just be the new career cycle. And I write a lot about this on Forbes, about how, right now, the traditional career has long ago been blown up. People aren't staying with companies through retirement, but for the most part, they've been having 6-7 careers, but that's going to even increase. And people are going to jump around within their organization, learn new functions. Companies are going to reskill people to move them around as the market changes. So this idea of being a switcher is going to be so commonplace that it's just going to be a career. That's what people do.
It's the new normal.
It really is.
Well, and at the same time, people will need to still know the important aspects. What you were talking about is that the switchers need to do the heavy lifting for the hiring managers going through this process. So one of the things you really hit on in your book, which is so important, is helping people to understand how the hiring process works and what's going on in the mind of the hiring manager. So tell us more about that.
Yes. So I did a whole LinkedIn Learning course on this because I think it's so important. We're often not taught what's going on in the mind of the hiring manager. And as a licensed psychologist, I kind of dug in and deconstructed this, because I think it's such an important part of the process. We're taught that we need to go in and talk about all of our most impressive skills, and that they're going to be able to understand where those fit and make us an offer. And we're disappointed when that doesn't happen. But the reality is hiring managers are humans, which means they're biased and they focus in on certain things. And so the more you know your audience, the better you're going to be able to present your case in a way that gets around some of those biases. Hiring managers have emotions like all of us. And as you know, because you've written a fabulous book on this and how emotions play into the job search process. And they make decisions based on these emotions, probably without even realizing it. And again, when we understand this as a job seeker, we can take our knowledge and we can use it to get around or get over some of these hurdles. And certainly, at the end of the day, hiring managers don't like hiring. And for anybody who's hired, think about it. It takes you away from the work that's piling up on your desk. If you have an opening on your team, you probably even have more work. And now on top of that, you have to interview people and you have to spend all this time maybe going through resumes. And you don't want to do that. You want to fill the job. You want to feel good about that person. And quite frankly, hiring managers don't care if you're a switcher. What they care about is, can you do the work? Are you resourceful enough to figure out what you don't know? And will you make me look good as a hiring manager, whether that's, getting good results or representing our team? And when you boil it down to that, you start to realize that, wow, it's not that complicated. I don't have to apologize for what I don't have, but I should use my time talking about what I do have and how I can make this hiring manager's life easier and how I'll make this person look good. And when you start to think of it that way, it makes a lot more sense. And I think people need to understand that the hiring process in general is about elimination, not selection. And it's a very different process in the brain. When the brain is looking to eliminate decisions, you're looking for easy ways, red flags, whether they're assumptions or not. So, okay, you're going to be too expensive. I don't know anything about that program that you're talking about on your resume. Your resume, I can't even decipher because it's too confusing. You're not what I want. Whatever those things are, you're too experienced. You're not experienced enough. There's so many easy ways, and these are not fair, and they're not always logical. And sometimes they're just plain silly, quite frankly. But this is what's happening behind the scenes. And when you think about elimination, you start to approach your job search strategy differently. You start to think about, okay, what do I need to do to get to the next level and not get eliminated? And so whereas a lot of people put their most impressive accomplishments, I tell people put your most relevant, because even though they might not feel like you're most impressive, what got you here may not get you there. So think about, what does that hiring manager want to see front and center? And that might be something you did in a job 5 years ago. That might be something that you did in a volunteer role, or, not in your current role. And so I think it's a little uncomfortable for job seekers to approach the job search this way, but it will help you not get eliminated, and it will help the hiring manager see you as the person who can solve his or her problem. So strategy is very important. And once you understand what's going on in the mind of the hiring manager, you can create a rock solid strategy and get to the next level and get that offer.
I love that. You just gave a perfect example a minute ago about how a lot of times the voice in our head is just telling us like, oh, you don't have this, so you have to apologize for it. But maybe the hiring manager wasn't even going there until you brought it up. And now that you've just given them a reason to eliminate you.
Yes. Yeah, we're often our own worst enemy. We're trying to do, the right thing. And it's like, well, look, you have 45 minutes. Do you want to spend it talking about all the things you don't have? Or do you want to spend it talking about all the actual things you do bring that can be of value? Use that time wisely.
Exactly. Okay, so you just demonstrated that the hiring process is emotional for doing the hiring, but even more so for the job seekers. And of course, the emotional roller coaster that job seekers go through is the whole reason that I wrote my book, Take Control of Your Job Search, the 10 emotions you must master to land the job. And if you're just focusing on the tactics of the job search and not addressing some of the underlying emotions that you may be experiencing, it's going to come out, and your network and the hiring managers are going to see it. So a job search is stressful under normal conditions, but when you add a pandemic and a career switch, things can go to a whole new level. So what is your top advice for people to manage their emotions during the job search?
Yeah. So first, my top advice is to get your book, because I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about. They, in business, emotions are kind of put to the side, but there's a lot of scientific research that every decision we make, from what do we want for dinner to who am I going to hire, emotions play into it. And I think you're going to be a much more successful job seeker if you understand both your own emotions as well as the emotions of the person maybe hiring you or networking with you, because then you're going to, again, be able to put together a strategy that makes sense and not get in your own way. And I think that's something that we often do. We get in our own way because of the messages in our head, whether we're thinking, oh, I'm not qualified for that, or, oh, I don't have these 3 things, so I feel the need to apologize for that. When in fact, like you said, Lauren, that's not what people are wanting to hear. They want to hear how you can solve the job or solve the problems so that you can get the job. But to your point, You're right. Right now, the job search is even more stressful. There's more competition. Now that people are hiring remote only jobs, that just increases the competition. And people are feeling, in some cases, like they may be furloughed or their jobs kind of on the line, and so they're feeling this pressure perhaps in their current role, or maybe they've lost their jobs and they've been unemployed for a period of time, which makes you feel even more pressured. And this comes out, quite frankly, emotions will wait for you to be addressed, and if you don't address them, they come out in the interview, they come out when you're networking. It might be in the form of rambling or fidgeting or, who knows? But what happens is somebody else perceives this. Humans are very good at perceiving that there's something up. And sadly, they usually come to a conclusion that's negative, that there's something this person maybe is being truthful about, or they're desperate, and why are they desperate? And so you might never know this, but that emotion that's coming through impacts you. And maybe it's a specific question. Maybe you were laid off from your last job, and every time you get that question, you really tense up and you get defensive. I mean, if that's the case, practice your answer to that to the point where there's like no emotion left in it. Know what you want to say, be prepared for it, put a smile on your face, answer it, and then end it with something that moves the conversation forward. For example, our department was downsized with the pandemic due to us losing key customers in this area. And now I'm excited to be taking my 10 years of experience in customer service to a company like yours where I can do X, Y, and Z. So really, really, this is what that take control of your emotions, take control of your career comes from, because you're not stuck. You're not at the mercy of the hiring manager. If you practice, if you think through these things, you really can control where that conversation goes to put the best light on yourself as a candidate.
Yeah, so the question is, the emotions are there whether you want them there or not. The question is if they are in the driver's seat, or if you're in the driver's seat of your job search or your career. So great example there. So as we were just talking about, we can just be our own worst enemy in the job search process sometimes. And I think women especially have that inner critic going all the time. And so often the voice in our heads is just not saying very nice things. Would you say those things to a friend? Of course not. So this is why we see the stats where women won't even apply for a job unless they can tick off every check in the job description. So what advice do you have for people, and women specifically, when they hear that negative voice in their head get going?
Yeah. So first off, recognize it. You've got to get out of your own way. And the only way to get out of your own way is to recognize it and say, there's that voice again. And you'll when you start to pay attention, you start to hear it all the time. I'm not qualified. I've never done that. I don't think I could do this job. They're never going to want me. They're going to laugh. All of these things. We all have our messages, not only with the job search, but a lot of things. We criticize ourselves as parents, as pretty much every area of our life, we can find a criticism. So what I would say is my mantra is always, what will happen if I don't do this? So what will happen if I don't apply? What will happen if I don't reach out to this person? What will happen if I don't ask? And the answer is always the same: nothing. Nothing will happen. So I have 100% of nothing happening if I do nothing. And I have a much higher percentage of something happening if I do something. And that's always what I come back to. So when you hear that voice in your head steering you away, ask yourself, well, what's going to happen if I do nothing? And if you want that job, or you want to be considered, or you want that promotion, or you want that raise, or you want that project at work, or whatever it is, if you don't ask, you don't get. Pure and simple. Other people can't read your mind. I know your mind will always go to those crazy answers. Like, how could you ask for a promotion in a pandemic? How could you, and it's like, you may get that response. It's true. I'm not saying that won't happen, but there's a chance you'll get a response you never thought of. It's not black or white. There's lots of gray. You might get we can't do it now, but we can consider it in January. We can't do that, but we can do this. And there's a lot of studies out there showing that when you ask, even if you don't get what you perhaps initially asked for, you get something. So you get somewhere. So that percentage goes from 0 to above 0. And for all of us, that's a great thing. So when you find yourself kind of relenting to that voice in your head, ask yourself, what happens if I do nothing? I get nothing. And that's not a good result.
Right. And even if you go for it and you don't get it, then it starts a conversation potentially, or you might be considered for the next opportunity, or your boss now knows that you're interested in taking on more projects and you get to have the opportunity to stand out a little bit more. So lots of opportunities come from just putting your hat in the ring in some form or another, whether it's at your current company or someplace else. So when people are putting their hat in the ring for an opportunity, just broadly, what advice do you have for people to stand out in their job search?
Mm-hmm. So one of my pieces of advice I say a lot is do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. And that kind of, everyone's applying online. So don't apply online. I mean, yes, you might have to apply online for the applicant tracking system and data tracking and all that fun stuff, but get a referral, or recognize that the jobs that are posted online are just a fraction of what jobs are available, especially the higher you are in level. So your network is obviously going to be one of the most key things to open that door to those opportunities that are not online. But online is a tough road right now. There's a lot of people applying online, a lot of people, it's really easy to just click and send the resume, which means that you're competing with essentially 100% of the market for maybe 30 to 40% of available jobs. So those are pretty bad odds. I'm not saying don't do it, but if you are going to do it, you want to look at your network, see if you know someone in the company. It doesn't need to be somebody in that department. It doesn't need to be somebody in HR. It could be somebody in a different geography. Just somebody to shepherd your resume in front of someone who will actually look at it, because that's the key. I fully believe, Lauren, that the hardest part of a job search is getting in front of that decision maker, period. You can prep for the interview, you can prep for the salary negotiations, all that stuff, but getting that conversation can be hard. But there's good news. There's a lot of things we could do now. We have LinkedIn. When I first started my career, there was no LinkedIn. There was really no way to get people's contact information, especially if it wasn't local or publicized anywhere in the company. And so we have all of these tools, and not just LinkedIn, but a lot of companies post on Twitter. A lot of leaders have social media where they post articles and blogs and other things. So we have access now that we didn't have before. What I think people do is they're shy about accessing this. They think, oh, I don't want to be a stalker, or I don't want to, reach out to the wrong person. But again, it goes back to what happens if you don't? Nothing. Or you're playing the applicant tracking system odds, which again are not good, especially right now. And it really does go down to, we have these tools. If you don't know how to use them, easy fix: take a LinkedIn learning course, work with a coach, figure out how to use them, find one that really works for you, and start following the people you want to be with. Start reaching out to the people that maybe can make that connection. And one of the things I talk about in my TEDx talk, which I think a lot of people are surprised about, is that we already have a network. And that network is the people who already know us, who already trust us, our neighbors, people in our community, our family, our colleagues, maybe from past companies. What we don't do with these individuals is tell them our goals. We don't talk to them about, hey, I'm looking for a job and I'm really focused on these 3 companies. Is there anyone you know there? Because these people are cheerleaders. They want to see us be successful, but we're not sharing how they can help us. And so I think that's one of the biggest missed opportunities for many of us, is just not sharing what we're looking for with the people we know, because chances are they have a connection, or chances are they'll see an article or a job ad next week that they can forward to us. And this happens all the time. So if you're feeling like, networking tough for me, start with the people you know. I guarantee you that they will have ideas, leads, and suggestions that will get you to the next step.
Yeah, and if you just put the shoe on the other foot and you ask yourself, well, if Dawn asked me for a little bit of help or an introduction, would I be willing to give it? Absolutely, no problem at all. And so sometimes we're afraid to ask for ourselves, but again, we'd be willing to ask for a friend. So
Yes.
if you think about it in the other direction, then you realize you're not making that huge of an ask.
You're really not. And, and somebody can say no. If they really feel uncomfortable, they can say
Yeah.
no. You say, okay, that's fine. I get it. But again, if you don't ask, you don't get. But I love that. Yeah. When you flip it around and you say, would you help somebody? Well, of course I would help somebody. Well, then why wouldn't they help you?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's just taking the very simple approaches, and even if they don't know someone great, are they willing to at least make an introduction to someone? So really being willing to put yourself out there. And that's another piece, that women, I believe, have great relationships overall, but we're not as good at leveraging those relationships for our own benefit. And that's something that there's some opportunity to grow and develop in some of those skills as well. So just as we're wrapping up, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think we're seeing some good hiring trends right now as we get into 2021. So help us think ahead so that we set ourselves up for success the next time around. How can you recession-proof your career?
Yeah, no, I love that question, because I think we all need to focus on managing our careers in the same way we manage our health, we manage our money, our finances. Career is not something, a lot of us kind of let it just float, happenstance, see what happens. And we can't do that anymore. Not if we want to be recession proof. So there are three things I think everybody should look at least annually, but certainly if you're in a job search, or certainly if you're thinking that your industry might be impacted. First is your marketable skills. Your marketable skills will continue to shift. Maybe some of the things that are peripheral will become central. Maybe some of the things that you used to do regularly will be taken over by technology. So you really have to pay attention to what's going on in the market and what skills are marketable. And we are all going to have to upskill, reskill throughout our careers. It's not optional. And that doesn't mean going to a 2-year program or anything. It might mean taking a course, getting a certification, or taking on a project where we can learn something, but that's going to be critical. The second thing is really branding ourselves, making ourselves visible. And I know this can be tough for people as well, but you may be great at what you do, but if others don't know about it, particularly the decision makers in your company, you're going to get overlooked for the great assignments and the new customers who are coming in, and not get those opportunities to grow and be in front of people and build your skills and build your credibility and brand. So I think we all need a visibility strategy that really helps us get in front of those decision makers. And, for those of us who tend to not be self-promoting, it can feel a little bit difficult, but there's a lot of ways to do it. As a matter of fact, I have a whole LinkedIn learning course on that too, because it's so important. And then the last thing I would say is your network. Your network is not just for your next job search. Your network is for life, and you should be not only grooming the network you have and staying in touch with people to the extent that you can, but being strategic about it, thinking, am I building a diverse network in various industries, across geographies, across cultures, across functions, so that you're really trying to create new circles. Because even though you may be very focused in a specific industry, there's so many hybrid industries right now. There's so many industries that are starting to partner that you would think, wow, never would have thought those two would merge. So I think we need to be very diverse in how we build our network, and very intentional. And that doesn't mean you have to go to a big event every week, but it does mean that when you meet somebody, and you have a conversation, reach out to them on LinkedIn with a personalized message. When you see somebody post on social media, make a comment, like it, share it. I mean, these things that we can do very easily to just both be visible and get in front of people, if we just make a habit out of it. So those three things, really reinventing your skills, building your brand and visibility, and building a diverse network, I think will create a situation where, regardless of what happens in the economy or in the marketplace, you'll have lots of opportunities to land on your feet.
Dawn, I couldn't think of a better way to end our conversation than those 3 points. I talk all the time about the importance of brand and connections. And I think those are the top success factors for a great career and a great job search. So thank you for all the great insights that you brought to us today, and really can't recommend your book enough for people who are considering a career change. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate being here.